All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about an emotion that, let's be honest, most of us spend our lives trying to run away from: grief. But we're not just talking about the kind of loss you might be thinking of. We're going to go deeper and explore how this incredibly powerful emotion, when we actually face it, can be the gateway to becoming our most authentic selves. And that really brings us to the core question here. What if this very thing we push away, this feeling we've been taught to see as a weakness, is actually the key we've been searching for all along? The one thing we really need to embrace if we ever want to truly heal and grow. To really get this, we first have to talk about a very specific kind of grief. It isn't that loud, public kind of sorrow that everyone recognizes. No, this one's quieter. It's more personal. And a lot of the time, it's the grief we hide even from ourselves. And this is such a critical distinction. So on one side, you've got what we can call loud grief. This is the pain of losing a loved one. It's visible, society gets it. But on the other side is quiet grief. And this is about mourning something that was never even there. It's that deep ache for what you should have had, but didn't. So what does that actually mean, this quiet grief? Well, it's grieving the childhood that wasn't safe or nurturing. It's mourning the parent who, yeah, they might have been in the house, but they were emotionally checked out. It's the profound sadness for the safety you always craved but never really felt. And it's for that real version of you, the one you had to bury just to survive. And it is so, so important to get this. This type of grief doesn't always look like the movies. It's not always about big, dramatic tears. More often than not, it shows up as this subtle, constant weight. A numbness you just can't seem to shake. Or maybe it's a quiet stillness that just feels kind of empty. It's the feeling that creeps in when you finally stop pretending that everything was okay.
Okay, so what happens when we do what we're told to do, when we try to just skip over this whole messy process? What's the real cost of avoiding our grief? I mean, most of us get this message pretty much from day one, don't we? Be strong. Just move on. Forgive and forget. We're basically programmed to see grief as some kind of obstacle to get through as fast as possible, instead of a natural process we need to move with. But that advice, even when it's well-intentioned, is asking us to skip a completely necessary part of our own healing.
And this idea is captured so perfectly here. What is buried doesn't disappear, it festers. See, emotions don't just magically vanish because we ignore them. When we bury grief, it doesn't just rest in peace. Nope. It festers under the surface and it ends up poisoning the soil of our lives today. So how does that show up in real life? Well, it can look like flying off the handle over small things in your relationships. It can look like repeating the same self-sabotaging patterns over and over again. It can feel like you're just stuck and you can't figure out why. Or maybe it's those sudden waves of anger or sadness that seem to come out of absolutely nowhere. These are the ghosts of grief that we haven't dealt with. So if avoiding grief is so damaging, what's the alternative? And this is where we get to the core idea here. We need to reframe this whole thing. We need to stop seeing grief as an obstacle and start seeing it as a doorway to truth.
Let's just redefine this word for a second. Forget weakness. Forget being broken. Let's think of grief as a sacred passage. It's the journey we have to take to get from the land of denial, which, kept us safe for a while, into the raw, honest truth of what we went through. And it's only in that truth that healing can actually start.
And this brings us to probably the most important sentence in this whole explainer. Let's just sit with it for a moment. You cannot heal what you have not grieved. It's like you can't put a bandage on a wound you refuse to even admit is there. Grieving is the act of looking at the wound, of acknowledging it, so that it can finally get the care it needs. Okay, so this all sounds really important, right? But what does it actually mean to practice grieving? How do we actually walk through that doorway instead of just staring at it from a distance? First things first, and this is so important. This process is not about pointing fingers or getting stuck in old stories about being a victim. The goal is way more personal and honestly way more empowering. It's simply about naming your own loss. It's about giving a voice to it and saying, yes, this happened. This was real, and it hurt. So the source material breaks this down into 4 key movements. First, you have to name the loss. Honor what you didn't get. Second, you let go of the roles you had to play to survive. Third, and this is huge, you give yourself total permission to feel everything. The anger, the sadness, all of it,
without judging yourself for it. And last, you just witness the whole process without putting a deadline on it.
Let's just hang on that second one for a minute, grieving the roles. Maybe you had to become the overachiever just to feel worthy of love, or the peacekeeper, always trying to stop the fighting. Maybe you learned to be the person who never had any needs, or the one who was always smiling no matter what was going on inside. These weren't you. They were survival strategies, and grieving them is about letting go of that heavy armor so you can finally find out who's underneath.
And we just have to remember, there is no finish line. We have to let go of this crazy pressure to get over it. Grief is not a problem you can solve with a checklist. It's a deeply human process that just asks for one thing: our patient, compassionate attention. It asks to be witnessed.
Now, I know this all probably sounds incredibly hard. And you know what? It is. But the source material is really clear about this. On the other side of this really difficult journey, there are some pretty amazing gifts waiting for us. I absolutely love this quote because it completely reframes what loss is. Every single illusion you let go of, every protective role you release, every tear you finally let fall, it isn't just an ending. It's actually an active creation. You're clearing out space. You're making room for something more authentic, more real, more you, to finally grow. And what are the things that can grow in that newly cleared space? A much deeper clarity about who you really are and what you really want. A kind of hard-earned wisdom that you can only get by walking through the fire. A real softening of all that defensive armor you've been carrying around for so long. And ultimately, it's a return trip, right back to your own heart.
So let's end with this final thought, because it's a powerful one. We tend to think of grief as the last awful step after something terrible happens. But what if we've had it completely backwards this whole time? What if grief isn't the end of our healing? What if it's the very beginning of us becoming who we were always meant to be?